Farm Bureau does so much for the farmers and the rest of us, as a matter of fact. And I want to bring up Eric Suits, president of the Champaign County Farm Bureau, to deliver some comments about some rule changes, law changes, things we ought to keep on the radar screen. Eric?
It's sort of ironic that I'm here tonight because I think it was probably 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago I walked into the bank on Saturday morning and met with one of them. I think Andy was in the office that day, and as I left that day I thought, I ought to call Callie and Andy Boer, because I said I think I know somebody who should, or an issue that should be talked about at the Ag Expo. The only thing is I didn't intend on being the person here to speak to it, because I think the day that I finally got time enough to call Callie about thinking about having somebody come speak on this issue was about the same time she was planning on asking me to do something. So, from my experience, I guess it's hard to be in an audience like this and speak to things, because like I tell people, I said, if I look out in the audience, I think I have a first grade teacher out there, I think I have a school bus driver, and I have a great aunt that's here from Minnesota. So Aunt Helen, nice to see you. But so that makes you think about what to speak about, and I guess and try and tie in things that I'm experiencing with serving on the Farm Bureau, serving on the Soil and Water Conservation District, to things that are near and dear to me, being a son of this area and growing up in this area, and and also coming from the University of Illinois and graduating from there, ironically in 1993. And I think how I'll start it off is, I think, to quote one of the past presidents, Andrew Sloan Draper of the university, his quote always was, "The strength of Illinois lies in her soils." And for those of us who have grown up in Champaign County, we're fortunate enough to have ancestors who knew the value of what was underneath this swampland and knew how to drain it and make it productive for those of us as their descendants, to be able to make it one of the most productive places in the world. But as we look forward right now, and with some things that happened and tying it into that time frame when I graduated from the university, ironically that was the year that I went and worked over in Iowa. And for Mom and Dad it was ironic too, because in the 4 years that I spent at the university, they saw me less than in the 26 weeks that I spent living in Iowa that year. I spent a lot of time coming back across the bridge, and that was the year of the flood. So coming back after that and then going to work in the fertilizer industry, I worked a lot with Bob Haft at the U of I as I was sort of growing up in fertilizer, and that was probably where a lot of this concern that I'm talking about tonight that I'll bring up was starting to find its root in, because that was one of the biggest flush outs of the Mississippi River Valley. And the issue of hypoxia down in the Gulf of Mexico, and that being the growing area of low oxygen concentration down there, and the impact that could have on marine life and the fishing industry down there, started to come to the forefront. And that's probably why, as we get to this point today, we're looking at things like the nutrient loss reduction strategy. So I guess I'd sort of ask the audience, I'm going to do a little bit of a poll. At this point in time in 2015, how many people have at least heard the term nutrient loss reduction strategy? So there's at least some. So some of the efforts are getting put in place, and I want you to think about it long and hard, because I think it risks attacking our freedom to operate. We're right now in the opening period, the opening year of an 8-year voluntary period, where we get to look at implementing some best management practices. That's how they're framed up. We're implementing practices on our farms voluntarily to try and make an impact on sending less total nutrient load down through the Mississippi River Basin down to the Gulf of Mexico. And I guess I just sincerely ask that everybody, there are a lot of organizations working on this issue, working on the research behind this issue, and then trying to formulate and get a plan together how we can work unified in conveying that message out to the farming population in a way that makes it such that we're able to have the opportunity to adopt some of these practices, embrace them, think about them in ways on how they can not only improve the level of water quality for our urban neighbors and for neighbors around the country, but also not negatively impact what we do on the farm. I think it's important that people think about the opportunity as not that we're being asked to use less, but the second part of President Draper's statement was the strength of Illinois lies in her soil and its intelligent development. So I think what we're looking at this juncture in time is looking at several different ways that we can think about what we do in farming and the use of nutrients so that we can make a more effective and efficient use of them. So on your behalf, there's several key agencies like the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, Illinois Farm Bureau is working on this, the Council of Best Management Practices, and all of us as soil and water conservation districts looking at this issue. Some of the key things that are happening that are bringing this issue to the forefront, I'm sure many of you have heard about the lawsuit in Iowa between the Des Moines Water Works and several of the community or watersheds up to the north where the public sourcing of water is fed from happening there. There's been a regulatory change in the state of Ohio that going forward there will be no frozen application of fertilizer over there. And even for us here locally, I mean, I don't know how many of you are aware how close the Lake Vermilion nitrate levels got this spring to almost putting the Danville area on a bottled water program, or the Lake Sangamon area over by Springfield, that the levels almost reached the point where they were going to have to make some concessions for ladies who were pregnant in possibly having to utilize bottled water. So some of those issues obviously ramp up the gravity of this particular situation. So be on the lookout. All of us are partnering agencies. The Nutrient Research and Education Council, NREC, is conducting, working with IFCA with some of the dollars that are funded from the purchases of tons of fertilizer that you make for your farm to put research projects in place so we can test the effectiveness and validity of some of the best management practices that they're wanting to put in play, get a better handle on this issue, and really not only sort of sell and support the foundation of why best management practices should be used, but also protect the integrity of the industry of agriculture. Because obviously as we have flush outs of rain events like we're experienced in not only our area, but more specifically the collar area around Danville this year, where you have events as much as 9 inches at one juncture in time, there is a limit to the effect that we can have in what we do on our own farm, because nature is a component of what we do in production agriculture. But embrace the concept as you see meetings develop, and they will over time. Please get involved and see how how you can work on your own operation to implement some of the things we'll be doing with the programs.
Eric, are there any individuals or organizations that are already championing regulations? Are there any that come to mind that have really stepped forward, or is this more just to be prepared for that happening someday?
I think it is, at this point in time, it's more to be prepared. You know, some of the, you're asking more on the regulation side, but as far as people who are really spearheading some of the research, individuals such as Howard Brown and then Dan Schaefer with the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association are spearheading some of these research projects for us to, you know, support the cause from our perspective of agriculture and be able to deal with the issue responsibly. What
are the top 1 or 2 things that a producer ought to be thinking about?
I think, you know, one thing that's already been done in this area, I think everybody would say that in the month of May after planting, you're seeing a lot more tanks moving around at side dress time than you were before. Probably the first and foremost is that an individual operator look at spreading out their application of nitrogen, putting it in more events so that you're not putting as many pounds or an intense amount of pounds out in one application. I mean, if there's one thing that is foot stomped the most, it is the 4R approach to nutrient management, which is the right source, the right rate, the right time, and the right place. So that's probably the key message that individuals that are working on the issue would like to share.
Any questions? Be vigilant and support your farm organization, right?
Yep.
All right. Eric, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you,
it,
Max.
sir.